315, every available unit in the city needs to get here now. We're taking on AK-47 fire from out front of the synagogue.
We made a decision as a collective group right there that based on a priority of life, we're going to continue to push and clear the rest of the structure.
The carnage and what we saw in there was so graphic and so evil. This can't be real.
Just as I was getting ready to cross the threshold, Tim got shot. And then Mike dropped. All I could see was his muzzle flash.
Those were scenes from a recent documentary about the terrible attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh 7 years ago today. On that day, back in October 7 years ago, a truck driver with a streak of anti-Semitism used a high-powered automatic weapon to kill 11 members of that synagogue and wound 6 other people. John Gregory Bowers was convicted for that attack. He's now on death row. The documentary is called Confronting Hate, Responding to the Tree of Life Attack, and it's on YouTube now and includes never-before-told stories from some of the first responders there. The filmmaker is Jon Becker. He's host of the Debrief podcast, and his company, Aardvark Tactical, provides essential gear to SWAT teams and other first responders, and he's joining us now here on Connecting America. Good morning, John. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So tell us, what inspired you to even make this documentary on such a dark subject?
So often with these events, we see the coverage focus on the killers. And, with the show, The Debrief, what we do is we cover these incidents, hoping to get lessons learned for police departments to prevent, injuries and improve response to the next events. And what really struck me with this one, when I sat down with the team and I sat down with the victims, was the story of the first responders needed to be told. And it had been overlooked in part because of a 5-year federal gag order, but in part because as a society, we're fixated on the killer and why the killer did it. And we don't stop to take a moment to realize the humanity of the people that went in to rescue these people.
John, I'm so glad you're pointing that out. You make an excellent point. I covered this story pretty extensively. I spent time in Pittsburgh afterwards with Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, and we do often talk about the culprit because we want to know what made him tick. We think if we can crack that psychology, maybe we can stop the next one that doesn't really work. We also often, I think, rightfully talk about the victims and all that was lost, but it's the first responders that I do think get short shrift. And so tell us what, just some of the fallout has been for them and what their experience was.
Well, you heard in the intro package, just kind of the offhanded statement, based on priority of life, we made the decision to proceed. And people don't understand that what that means is that these officers decided that because there were victims down in this facility, because the killer was still active, that they were going to put their own lives in peril to go and rescue the people that were inside. And in this case, several police officers were shot. Tim Matson was, almost mortally wounded, has had 20 plus surgeries. I think we have this idea that when we hear on the news that the police officer left the hospital, that it's over and everything's fine. And that's not the case. These officers carry injuries and carry emotional wounds with them for the rest of their lives. And we kind of forget about it and it doesn't get covered. And it was really clear when I met with these guys exactly how much damage this event had done to them and how much damage it had done to the victims and to the whole Squirrel Hill community.
Are there some lessons that first responders learned from this particular Tree of Life attack, John, that will help maybe defend against any future attacks in houses of worships and schools?
Yeah, I think absolutely. One of the problems with these events is we do not, there is no centralized database for sharing information. And so what ends up happening is the stories kind of get passed, but the lessons learned don't always get passed. There are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. And so there isn't a centralized way to do that. And part of the reason we created the show was to share them. This team did an amazing job. I mean, they put themselves really directly into harm's way and suffered a price for it. But at least 2 of the people that we interviewed in the documentary, Andrea and Dan, are alive because the team got in there as quickly as they did. And I think that, the urgency of response and willingness to engage the threat is really probably the lasting legacy. And the courage of these first responders is something we should all think about and take with us.
That's such a great point, John. After this, I do remember that there was a national conversation about, well, should there be more security posted outside of synagogues, around the country, really houses of worship? Should there be more sort of armed security? That was kind of one of the solutions that people were coming up with, and not all congregations felt comfortable with that. What were the other lessons that could be taken away, or that have been adopted since then?
I think one of the things that we need to think about as a national dialogue is that when these events happen, we don't try to figure out how to fix this problem. We don't try to figure out how could we, improve law enforcement response? How can we better fund law enforcement training? We try to figure out who's at blame. And one of the things that was nice about Tree of Life versus Uvalde, Parkland, some of the other incidents, is there was at least discussion about how effective the police had been. But generally speaking, the answer is, who can we blame this on? And I think it just enables us to kind of put it in the past and pretend it's not going to happen again. And we are dramatically underfunding law enforcement at this point. I've worked with police departments for 40 years. We are underfunding and undertraining our law enforcement, and the price of it is these kinds of events.
Which is a sad statement that, that we have to anticipate there will be another one of these events somewhere, someday. Again, this documentary, Confronting Hate, Responding to the Tree of Life Attack, it's available on YouTube. Jon Becker, host of the Debrief podcast and CEO of Aardvark Tactical. Thanks so much for being here on Connecting America. Look forward to, diving in and digesting what you're putting out there. I think it's really important.
Thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah.